Hi, Guy. Tonight we're snuggling back in time to a world lit by firelight, wrapped in wool, and ruled by rhythms older than clocks. You step through a creaky wooden door, duck your head beneath the low beam because everyone back then was apparently 2 feet shorter, and find yourself in a cozy, smoky room. The hearth flickers. The stew smells faintly of onion, maybe cabbage, and maybe regret. But there in the corner is your destination, the bed. Not just any bed, a medieval bed. And not the romantic four-poster velvet-draped variety some noble might sleep in while dramatically dying of a poem. No, this one is humbler, but somehow possibly more comfortable. You lower yourself onto it and feel it shift under you, soft in some places, lumpy in others. This bed has lived. You're not sinking into a cloud. You're settling onto something firmer, more honest. You probably won't survive the lice, but that's tomorrow's problem. Before you fully sink into your pillow, a quick like and subscribe would mean the world if you're into sleepy stories like this. Got a strange bit of history you want to hear before bed? Drop it in the comments. Tuck yourself in, slow your breathing, and let the past keep you company tonight. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. So, what are you lying on? It's a mattress, but it's not foam. It's a sack, more or less. A big cloth bag, sometimes linen, sometimes wool stuffed with what's available straw reeds, feathers, heather, or even dried leaves. In colder regions, moss was common. In warmer ones, wool or rags might do the trick. The contents were fluffed and replenished seasonally ideally. But if you were poor, it probably meant sleeping in the same crushed straw for longer than your sense of smell would like. Still, there was a charm to it. The straw smelled clean when fresh, slightly sweet. Sometimes people tucked herbs into the mix lavender thyme mint to keep the bugs away and invite sweeter dreams. You give your own pillow a sniff. Mostly mint. Possibly mouse. Above you a canopy. Not the fancy embroidered kind, just a piece of linen stretched across ropes meant to catch falling dust. Or let's be honest, pieces of the ceiling. You've heard stories about thatched bits landing on people mid-snore. A good canopy earns its keep. Beneath you a bed frame of wood, sometimes rope-laced, sometimes just boards. Rope beds sagged over time and you had to tighten them periodically. Yes, that's actually where the phrase sleep tight comes from. You'd pull the ropes taut so your mattress didn't sink like a boat with low morale. And let's not forget the bedfellows. In most medieval homes, you didn't sleep alone. Family members piled in, siblings, cousins, occasionally visiting monks. Privacy was conceptual. The wealthy had larger beds, sometimes even shared with guests. The great bed of ware built in the 15th century reportedly slept 8 adults comfortably. Comfort here being relative and probably involving some sharp elbows. But even for common folk, beds weren't just for sleeping. They were for talking, warming up drying clothes, giving birth, dying, and telling stories. The bed was a hearth in its own right, a place where life gathered and lingered. You shuffle under the heavy wool blanket. It smells of lanolin and rain. It's scratchy, but in a reassuring way, like it knows its job and does not tolerate nonsense. Your head sinks into a pillow, lumpy but committed. You sigh. Outside you hear the low wind brushing against the shutter. A dog barks once. Then silence. The kind of silence you don't get anymore. No buzzing, no humming, no phantom notifications. Just you, the straw, the herbs, the lumpy comfort of shared warmth, and the weight of sleep beginning to pull you toward a rhythm deeper than memory. It's not luxury, but it is rest. And maybe, just maybe it's better this way. You wake up, blink in the early dark, and feel rested. No, not quite. Not yet. The fire has faded to red whispers beneath the ash, and the chill is creeping in through the cracks in the shutter. You roll over, someone snores. Maybe the dog, maybe you. It's not morning yet, not fully. Welcome to the middle of the night. No, not insomnia. This is normal. This is second sleep. You sit up slightly, rubbing your eyes, and remember, medieval folks didn't just sleep straight through. They had a curious rhythm. First sleep and second sleep. Two natural stretches of slumber divided by a quiet liminal hour or two. You've just awoken from the first. This was common across Europe. People would drift off after sunset sleep for a few hours, wake around midnight, stay up for a bit, and then return to bed until dawn. This wasn't considered a problem. It was part of the design. You poke the fire back to life, warm your hands, and let your mind wander in the dim light. There's a pot of steeped herbs on the hearthstone, leftover valerian and chamomile from earlier. Still warm, still bitter. You sip, feeling your shoulders relax again. This interlude, it had a name. The watching hour, the waking, or just the hush. People prayed, reed-tended embers talked softly. Or other things. This was reportedly a very popular time for certain marital activities. The logic being the kids were asleep and no one had chores yet. You stretch, noticing the silence again. It's not empty. It's full of presence. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was a universal pattern or more common in rural areas. But across diaries, medical texts, and sermon notes, the rhythm shows up again and again, this natural, unhurried sequence of dozing, waking, reflecting, and returning. You wander to the window. Slide open the shutter just a crack. Moonlight spills in like a secret. The village is still. No shouting, no cartwheels. Just frost curling at the edge of the sill and the soft thump of something nocturnal landing on the roof. Possibly a cat. Possibly that one owl with a grudge. You think about saints and dreams. Many believe this watching time was a sacred moment when spirits stirred and visions were clear. People might light a candle and jot down thoughts, scribble prayers, or just stare into the middle distance like medieval philosophers with poor circulation. You glance at the parchment tucked into the edge of the hearth, a place for nighttime thoughts. Last week you wrote turnip stew. Dreams of flying, a pattern maybe. Science definitely not. But meaningful somehow, yes. You settle again, sliding under the blanket. Your body is ready for more. Not just more sleep, but second sleep. That richer, deeper slumber that follows the intermission. It's a return, a soft sigh into darkness with no pressure to perform, just to rest. You roll to your side, feel the warmth where someone else once lay. The dog shifts. The coals crackle. And slowly you drift, not backward, not forward, but downward. Back into the folds of dreams. No alarm waits. No clock ticks. Just breath blanket. And the quiet knowledge that sleep, like stories, doesn't need to happen all at once. It returns as it always has, in two gentle waves. And you ride the second one now. Eyes closed. Body slack. Wrapped in wool and silence. Your back aches slightly as you sit up groggily, aware that something has shifted. Not in the stars, not in the air, just under you. Straw! It's poking you in new places, whispering complaints of compression and time. The mattress, your faithful sack of dried vegetation, is settling, and not in a good way. The comfort you felt 2 weeks ago. Composted, literally. Time to fluff the bed. You push aside the covers, step down onto the cool, packed dirt floor, and shuffle across the room in your night tunic, which doubles as your day tunic if you're feeling lazy. You grab a stick, a real tool of the trade, and begin the process of beating the mattress into compliance. Thwack, thwack, shuffle, thwack. Each puff of straw smells faintly like last summer. Maybe autumn, depending on which corner you're beating. Some folks use heather or rushes or hay. You tried moss once, too spongy. And damp. Your cousins swore by feathers until the lice mutiny of 14. Beds back then weren't so much furniture as small, hay-filled ambitions. They didn't start out grand. Before you had this sack-on-frame luxury, you slept on bundles on the ground. Before that, the ground itself may be layered with rushes or bracken, maybe not. It depended on how desperate you were and how cold it was. The poor might curl in corners with cloaks. Servants often shared space with animals their warmth traded for privacy. Even nobility weren't above humble beginnings bedrooms as we know them. Didn't quite exist yet. The sleeping area was the room. One multi-purpose space where you cooked, cleaned, nursed your children, discussed local cheese disputes, and eventually laid down to rest. Now, with your mattress newly fluffed and slightly lumpy in a more creative way, you step back and admire it. You've added a few sprigs of lavender between the folds. Not for show bugs don't like it, and dreams might be sweeter. That's what the old woman down the lane says, and she once slept through a thunderstorm, a baptism, and a goat argument. You trust her. You plop down on the bed again. It sighs beneath you like a tired loaf of bread. You pull the cover's coarse wool layered with any spare fabric you can find and lie back watching the ceiling. The beams creak occasionally. They're original, probably, as in someone carved them with original mistakes and left their thumbprint in the wood. You can see it sometimes in the right light. Historians still argue whether early medieval homes prioritized sleep comfort at all or just survival. You're not sure. But you do know that nobody who sleeps on straw thinks of it as just a bed. It's curated, tended, fluffed, refluffed, occasionally wept into. You adjust your blanket again. Tuck the corner just so. There's no sheet, not really. Just layers of anything soft you could find, woven with prayers and patched so many times they tell stories. One patch came from your child's old tunic. Another a leftover wedding gift, a linen cloth embroidered with a fish that looks more like a confused worm. You fall asleep counting patches, not sheep. Each one holds a bit of warmth, a bit of memory, and by the time your breathing evens out, the straw has already shifted again, settling in around you like an old friend, familiar and imperfect. Because in this world, the bed isn't perfect, but it's yours. Hand-beaten, herb-scented, and waiting faithfully for you to collapse into it again tomorrow. Tonight, you're taking a slightly more fragrant route to sleep. The herbs are ready. They've been drying for weeks, bundled and hung upside down from the rafters, crackling softly every time someone bumps their head. Now, as the air cools and the fire settles into its night voice, it's time to put them to use. You reach for the sachet your neighbor helped you sew linen, roughly stitched, stuffed with valerian root chamomile blossoms, and just a touch of mugwort. It smells like something between a garden and a particularly earnest cupboard. You slip it beneath your pillow, breathing in the earthy sweetness. And now you wait. Because in the medieval world, sleep wasn't just something that happened. It was invited, cultivated. A ritual every bit as important as eating or praying or arguing about fence lines. Herbs were the earliest lullabies. Valerian was the favorite rooty bitter known to quiet nerves and summon sleep like a soft drum beat. You've chewed it raw once. Regret was immediate, but brewed into tea or tucked into a pouch magic. Lavender, of course, for soothing. Chamomile for calming. Hops, oddly enough, weren't just for brewing beer, they made for excellent sleep pillows, though the scent is somewhere between old bread and stubborn alehouse. You once visited a healer who swore by lettuce water. Boil the leaves, she whispered, and drink the green. You tried it. Not bad. Slightly swampy. But sleep came quickly and your dreams were vivid. A goose with a monocle still haunts you. Mugwort, though. Mugwort. That one's for dreams. Used in charms stitched into robes and whispered over in languages that barely made it to parchment. It's said to open the mind. You're not sure about that. But you once slept so deeply with mugwort under your mattress that you woke up speaking fluent goat. Or so your child claims. Some households burned herbs before bed. A smudge stick waved slowly to purify the air or simply cover up the scent of feet. Sage, rosemary, juniper. Smoke curling into the beams, tracing protective lines against dreams that bite. Others made salves. Sleep ointment spread on the chest or under the nose. Beeswax mixed with thyme and mint, or a dab of poppy resin if the night was particularly restless. You've seen poppy used with care respected like fire. Never more than a breath of it. Too much, and even the saints can't wake you. Then there were charms. Not herbs, but herb adjacent. Bundles wrapped in red thread. Writings tucked under beds. A prayer stitched into the hem of a nightshirt. A lullaby hummed in a circular melody meant to spiral the mind gently downward. You think of the one your grandmother sang. Lay thee down on mossy stone dream where stars and chickens roam. It made very little sense. It worked every time. Historians still debate how much of medieval sleep preparation was based on real pharmacology, and how much was belief stitched tight into habit. But from where you sit, elbows on your knees, sleep sachet warm from your hand, you know it's both. The body rests, but so does the mind, and sometimes it needs coaxing. The herb-scented air softens your thoughts. You lie back down your head, brushing the pillow, your cheek catching the faintest whisper of valerian. Outside a dog barks once, then silence. Inside the fire dims, and the herbs crush just slightly beneath your weight, release their story that sleep is sacred, that dreams are doors, that rest is not a luxury, it's a ritual. And you warm and heavy and gently wrinkled with the day are the honored guest. You're jolted slightly as the bed creaks in protest. Someone's just rolled over, possibly twice, and now the dog is wedged between your knees like a loaf of judgment. You blink blearily and remember, you're not alone in this bed, because this tonight is a very special bed. A famous one, actually. You're lying in the great bed of Ware, or a version of it anyway, scaled down for modern plumbing, and your general unwillingness to share sleep space with 6 strangers, and a merchant's apprentice who dreams loudly. Back then, though, this thing was the stuff of bedtime legend, constructed in the late 1500s. Okay, technically a bit past the medieval mark, but let's allow ourselves some wiggle room. This bed was massive. Not metaphorically, literally. 10 feet wide. Easily slept 4 couples. Possibly an entire choir if they were friendly. You lie back and stretch your arms out, still not touching the edges. This wasn't a noble's bed, surprisingly. It belonged to an inn. Yes, an inn. Which means it saw travelers, traders, drunk poets, and the occasional heavily perfumed nobleman fleeing his 3rd marriage. And people talked about it. It was referenced in plays, poems, gossip. Imagine a bed so famous that people stop by just to see it, or try to sleep in it, or leave their name carved into the frame. Yes, that happened. Medieval graffiti. I was here. I slept. I snored. The thing is, beds weren't always private. Especially in inns, you'd rent a space on a mattress. Maybe a corner, maybe half. Maybe someone else was already using the middle. Personal space, a concept not yet invented. And so in the great bed of Ware, you might find yourself curled up beside a merchant from Norwich, a washerwoman from Kent, a traveling juggler named Thomas who keeps kicking in his sleep, and someone who insists they once kissed a bishop. You'd share warmth and snores and possibly dreams. Historians still argue whether beds like this were novelties or practical solutions to overcrowded lodging. But either way, they remind you sleep wasn't solitary. It was social, sometimes joyful, sometimes chaotic. You think about the nights you've spent piled under blankets with family after a festival, a storm, or a particularly aggressive goose incident. It wasn't quiet, but it was safe. The bed creaks again. Someone mumbles in their sleep something about a carrot rebellion. You smile, because this bed, for all its crowding and creaking, is a reminder of just how deeply people valued rest. They didn't race to it the way you do now, collapsed after a screen-lit day. They made room for it, built furniture around it, shared it without shame. It wasn't a side activity. It was central. A big bed was a big deal. A generous bed meant you were hospitable. And a great bed, that meant stories. Of travelers passing through leaving behind dreams. Of nights spent in laughter whispers or complete exhaustion. Of a wooden frame that knew more secrets than the town clerk. You run your fingers over the imagined grain of this famous headboard. It's smooth in places, etched in others, not just with names but with time. And tonight, as the great bed of ware holds you alongside the dog and possibly someone named Agnes, you feel the weight of history. It's not heavy, it's soft and 10 feet wide. The stew was thick, the bread was crusty, and now you lie very still, wrapped in blankets and pondering your deepest, sleepiest regret, that third helping of boiled barley. Because Guy tonight's journey is a soft spiral down the rabbit hole of medieval bedtime snacks. Yes, they existed. Yes, they mattered. And yes, some were surprisingly gentle, while others were downright culinary sabotage. You shift under your woolen covers, listening to your stomach, try to remember whether it's grateful or offended. A burp escapes. The dog raises one eye in judgment. Historically speaking, food before bed was a calculated move. Not because of dreams, but because medieval life was hard and sleep demanded fuel. The workday began at sunrise and often didn't let up until dusk. If your stomach went to bed empty, it let you know, loudly. So people developed rituals, snacks, and sips to soften the edges of a long day. The most common evening treat, a pottage, which was basically a catch-all term for anything you could simmer. Lentils, barley, leeks, bits of meat or fish, if you were lucky, all thrown into a pot and stirred until time forgot what they were. You remember tonight's stew, well earthy herby, slightly overambitious. You ladled it into your bowl with pride, ignoring the suspicious noise your stomach made in reply. Some households saved a bit of cheese for bedtime. Yes, cheese. Soft, fresh, lightly salted. Often paired with a bit of bread or fruit. Apples if you could get them. Dried plums if you were fancy. Wild berries if you didn't mind possibly sharing them with a squirrel. Honey played a role too. A spoonful of honey stirred into warm milk or goat's milk if you had access to a cooperative goat. It was soothing, sweet, and gently soporific. You once tried it. The milk was perfect. The goat was not. Then there were the stranger traditions, like warm ale with spices. Think of it as a medieval nightcap nutmeg cinnamon, maybe a dash of clove heated and served thick. Posset, they called it. Part drink, part dessert, part science experiment. You once tasted a posset that tasted exactly like regret and cloves. Historians still debate whether these bedtime foods were purely practical or ritualistic. Some say the warmth helped digestion. Others claim the sweetness was symbolic, softening the day-easing worries. You suspect both, because even now your body responds to the ritual. The bite of crusty bread, the curl of steam from a wooden bowl, the way a warm drink settles behind your ribs like a sigh. You once heard an old rhyme passed from a midwife to a shepherd to your child? Bread to bind milk to mend sweet, to soften sleep to send. There's something in that. Because when the sun went down and the fire grew quiet, people didn't just collapse. They transitioned. Food was part of that. Not for indulgence, but for rhythm. A spoonful of stew. A hunk of bread. A quiet conversation between bites. Sometimes you think people slept better because they didn't go to bed thinking they were machines. They ate. They paused. They let the world grow soft around them before they ask it to go silent. You pat your belly, which has calmed mostly. The dog returns to snoring, and your dreams drift in slow and thick, flavored faintly with barley leeks and that whisper of honey still on your tongue. You wake to something brushing your forehead. Not a spider, thankfully, not a stray feather. No, it's fabric, soft, slightly scratchy, and tied under your chin. Your nightcap. Not the kind poured in a cup, mind you, but the kind tied onto your head to keep your scalp from plotting against you overnight. Because tonight, Guy, we're diving into the noble and deeply unfashionable world of medieval sleepwear, specifically the nightcap. You sit up slightly and feel it shift this humble bonnet of linen, maybe wool if the night's cold, clinging like a gentle, judgmental pigeon. Why the cap? Well, there are reasons. Some practical, some surprisingly mystical. First and foremost, warmth. Medieval homes were not insulated palaces. They were drafts wrapped in timber. Even with a fire, your ears could go numb by midnight, and your head poking out from beneath the covers became an easy target for the cold. The nightcap kept it cozy. Stylish, not remotely. Effective, absolutely. Second, cleanliness. You probably haven't washed your hair in a few days. Or weeks, maybe longer. Not out of laziness, but out of sheer reality. Bathing is a whole event with firewood and buckets and the very real risk of a goat walking off with your only clean tunic. The cap helps keep your hair contained, keeps bugs from moving in, keeps your pillow from smelling like wool stew. Third belief. Some folks thought the head was the source of vapors. Not just any vapors, but the kind that might cause illness, nightmares, or moral confusion. A covered head kept the humors in line, kept the dreams kinder. Historians still argue whether the nightcap's popularity was born from fashion function or folklore, but you know it's all three. Because you've heard the stories, like the one about the woman who dreamed of bees every time she forgot her cap. Or the man who claimed wearing two at once let him speak fluent Latin in his sleep. He didn't. There's something undeniably soothing about it. The way the tie pulls snug under your chin. The way it muffles the world just slightly. It's like a gentle reminder the day is done. You are off duty. Even your hair knows it's time to rest. You glance at your spouse who wears a similar cap floppier, embroidered with a pattern that might be stars or accidental soup stains. Your child's cap is too big. It's slipped sideways over one ear, turning them into a lopsided owl. You resist the urge to fix it. Sleep has claimed them, and sleep is sacred. Even the dog has a blanket folded just so over its ears. You lie back. The cap slips, slightly settles again. You breathe out through your nose, deep and slow. Outside, the wind tugs at the shutters. Inside, all is still. No flashing screens. No humming appliances. Just the sound of wool shifting, of a fire dying, of dreams waiting their turn. You once tried sleeping without the cap. You woke with your ear frozen and a hairline that looked personally betrayed. Never again, because this nightcap, it's more than cloth. It's a boundary, a signal to the world that you are closed for the day. You wear it like a crown, a very silly, slightly itchy crown. And as you drift back to sleep, you murmur a small rhyme passed down through generations of cap wearers. Cap on head and boots by door. Let the wind blow, I'll snore and snore. And snore you do, quietly, warmly, night-capped and proud. The bell rings once, a low, steady chime that hums through the stone walls like a polite knock on the ribs. You stir, blink, and remember you're not in your cottage tonight. You're in a monastery, and the monks are waking up. Or rather, they never fully went to sleep. Because while you were curled beneath a wool blanket and dreaming of barley, the brothers around you were busy mastering the art of segmented sleep. You slip out of bed feet bare on cold flagstone and join the slow procession of candlelit figures shuffling toward the chapel. No one speaks. No one needs to. They've done this every night of their lives. This is Matins, the midnight prayer. Part of the canonical hours, these sacred intervals divide the day and night into rhythmic calls to devotion. Monks don't sleep in 8-hour chunks. They nap in chapters. They rest like prose pause, pray return. And now with your eyes barely open and your body still humming with sleep, you feel the rhythm too. Historians often argue whether monastic schedules were humane or masochistic. You suppose it depends on whether you enjoy chanting at 3 a.m. in a stone building built for echoes. But there's something strangely soothing about it. The chanting begins low melodic like the wind through reeds. The Latin rolls over you in waves half heard, half felt. You don't understand every word, but the meaning isn't in the translation. It's in the act. The sound, the breath. You glance around, candles flicker. The abbot's head bobs gently. One novice is already asleep upright, murmuring through a psalm in his dreams. You smile. When Matins ends, there's a lull. Not breakfast, not yet. Some monks return to their cells. Others stay behind to copy manuscripts by lamplight, their quills scratching prayers into parchment that might outlive kingdoms. You curl back under your borrowed blanket. And here's the thing, you're not even groggy. Because the interruption didn't jar your sleep. It belonged there. The night has space in it like breathing in and out. First sleep, wake prayer, second sleep. You're back in that rhythm now, lulled by bells and chanting. And monasteries were experts in sleep rhythm. Their days were built on repetition and grace. Their nights on quiet observation and hard-earned slumber. Monks used herbal pillows too. Kept their chambers unheated in winter, claiming the chill honed the spirit. You suspect it also discouraged long naps. They slept in their robes, often sitting upright or on narrow wooden planks with thin straw pads. Comfort was not the goal. Alertness was. Readiness. And yet you've rarely felt such peace. Because despite the cold and the rough bedding, and the faint smell of turnip stew still lingering in the chapel cloakroom, there is a stillness here. A sleepiness that's allowed to stretch. No rushing, no guilt. Just a bell when it's time. A chant when it's right. A silence that holds you like a cradle. You drift off again, listening to the last echoes of song. You dream of illuminated manuscripts dancing, of candles that never melt, of monks who snore in Latin. And when the next bell tolls lauds this time, you rise again, not groggy, but somehow clearer, as if the night has been used properly. As if rest was not interrupted, but interwoven. And isn't that the point? To let sleep be part of the rhythm, not an afterthought. To wake gently, sing quietly, and dream with purpose. You tighten your robe, stretch your arms, and whisper the psalm you half remembered in your sleep. Domine lumine tuo videbimus lumen. In your light we see light, even at midnight. Especially then, you blink awake to a nose in your face. Not metaphorically, literally. It's your cousin, or possibly the neighbor's apprentice. Either way, someone's face is just there, inches from yours, snoring through a nostril that whistles like a slightly judgmental teapot. Welcome to the medieval bedroom guy, or more accurately, the medieval bed-sharing arrangement known to us charitably as everyone just pile in and try not to elbow grandma. You roll over slowly, trying not to disturb the dog or the toddler wedged near your feet. The room smells like straw soup and faintly of regret, but it's warm. The kind of warm that only happens when 8 bodies are crammed into a sleeping space designed for 4. Privacy, a concept reserved for nobility, or possibly cats. In your house, like in most medieval homes, sleep is a communal affair. Not out of laziness, but necessity. Heat is precious, space is limited, and honestly, nobody's going to waste firewood just so you can have your own room to dramatically sigh in. You remember the arrangement. Adults on the outside useful for fending off both drafts and nightmares. Children in the middle tucked like turnips under a blanket fortress, occasionally dreaming so violently they kick their neighbors. The dog, of course, wherever it chooses. Usually where your knees used to be. And that cousin, don't ask. He was just passing through 3 days ago and hasn't left since. You suspect he's part bed frame now. Beds weren't always raised. Poorer families slept directly on pallets laid across packed earth floors, sometimes with woven mats or loose straw added for insulation. Others had rope beds or wooden platforms, but the concept of a single bed didn't arrive until people invented both wealth and door locks. Historians still argue whether this shared sleeping model was cozy or chaos. You think it depends on the goat-to-person ratio. Because sometimes, yes, it's hard. There's snoring. There's the mystery foot in your ribcage. There's that one person who dreams with their elbows. But there's also comfort. You remember winter nights when the wind howled like a hymn gone wrong, and the fire couldn't quite reach the corners, but between your sister's snores and your father's occasional murmured prayers, the room pulsed with safety. Or mornings when you woke to laughter, someone recalling a dream involving a talking fish and three confused nuns. Even arguments feel softer when they happen under a shared blanket. You whisper them. You save the sharp words for later. Now you all just need sleep. And so the beds get fuller. Sometimes visitors are squeezed in. A traveling priest, a neighbor fleeing his own family's turnip drama, a wet nurse. Everyone makes room. Because space was not a symbol of status. Togetherness was. Even in sleep, maybe especially in sleep, the fire flickers, casting orange patterns on the low ceiling beams. Someone beside you sighs deeply and mutters something about beats. You nestle back into your corner of the chaos, adjusting the blanket over your toes and gently shifting the toddler's foot off your forehead. This isn't a spa. It's not silent, but it's real. Warmth through proximity. Safety through familiarity. Rest not in solitude, but in solidarity. And as you close your eyes again, you feel the heartbeat of the room, dozens of breaths rising and falling like a tide. No clock, no alarms, just a house full of dreams. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best kind of quiet. You wake up stiff and oddly noble, your arms crossed over your chest like a saint in a fresco, and your feet poking out from under the blanket as if waiting to be blessed or judged. It's not your usual position. Someone must have rolled into your spot in the night, forcing you to sleep in this dramatic, slightly eerie pose. And that guy brings us to one of the more curious sleep quirks of the medieval world positions with purpose. You adjust slowly, uncrossing your arms with the reverence of someone exiting a chapel. A rooster crows in the distance, or possibly a hungover rooster just trying to fit in. Back then, sleep wasn't just about how long you rested, but how you lay while doing it. Most people slept on their sides, curled up, fetal huddled for warmth and convenience. Not just because it was cozy, but because it kept body heat in and allowed for easier sharing of space without a lot of awkward limb tangling. But some positions had meaning. Serious meaning. Sleeping flat on your back, arms crossed like you just woke up mid-funeral, was associated with piety. It echoed the way saints were buried, or how holy figures were depicted in art. It suggested spiritual readiness, or a complete lack of spatial awareness. Side sleeping, especially on your right, was recommended by physicians of the time. Why? Because Galen said so. That's it. Galen, the Roman medical authority. Everyone kept quoting centuries after his actual relevance, insisted that lying on the right helped digestion. You tried it once, dreamed of cabbage for hours. Left side not advised. Too much pressure on the liver. Also apparently an invitation for nightmares. The kind that involved fish and unresolved debts. And stomach sleeping. Scandalous. Not for health reasons, but because, well, it looked indecent. Like you were either hiding something or dreaming something you probably shouldn't. Monks frowned on it. Midwives whispered about it. Dogs, of course, didn't care. Then there was the curled-up couple pose. Partners often slept back to back or spooned in a very literal, very medieval sort of way. Not always for romance, mostly for warmth and convenience. You knew one couple who slept with a plank between them to keep arguments from carrying over into dreams. It didn't work. They now dream in passive-aggressive Latin. Some households had sleeping chairs, upright wooden thrones with high backs and shallow seats. Ideal for napping in shifts. You once spent an uncomfortable night in one after losing a bet about whose turn it was to feed the goat. The goat won. Children slept wherever they landed, often diagonally, always with flailing limbs and dreams that somehow involved flying geese and sugar. You suspect this is universal. Historians still puzzle over how much of this was superstition versus habit. But oral tradition held strong. You grew up being told, don't sleep with your head facing west. That's for the dead. Sleep with your feet to the hearth so your heart stays warm. And the ever-popular don't point your toes at the door, or the spirits might think you're ready to leave. You chuckled then. You're not laughing now. Because after one night facing west, you dreamt you were chased by turnips, angry ones. There were even instructions for dreamless sleep. Lie still. Think of clear water. Say the name of a saint you trust. You usually chose Saint Cuthbert. He seemed like a man who wouldn't judge your weird pillow choices. As the sun rises, painting the walls with gold and smoke, you stretch this time on purpose, letting your limbs untangle from the various historical positions they assumed overnight. You shift onto your side, pull the blanket to your chin, and sigh. Sleep wasn't passive in the Middle Ages. It was practiced, taught, wrapped in custom and posture. And now, as your eyes drift closed again, your arms settle gently around your middle, not crossed like a martyr, not sprawled like a noble, but curled like someone who's earned their rest. The sun is high and the field is buzzing, not metaphorically, but with actual bees and the occasional overly confident fly. You're not working today, at least not in the traditional sense. You're napping, publicly and unapologetically. Because Guy today we honor one of the great overlooked treasures of medieval life, the sacred snooze of naps. You lie on a patch of flattened grass tunic, rumpled one arm flung across your eyes to block the glare. Someone's goat wanders past. A child is poking something with a stick nearby, hopefully not you. But otherwise it's quiet and perfectly acceptable. Because in this time and place, naps weren't lazy. They were logical. You've been up since dawn, literally probably breaking ice in a bucket hauling wood, or staring angrily at a batch of overly moist dough. A brief afternoon rest. It's not indulgence, it's survival. Plenty of medieval folks worked in chunks. Dawn to mid-morning break for food, short rest, back to work till dusk. Monks had it timed to the bell. Farmers followed the sun. Children followed no rules whatsoever and simply collapsed where they stood. You've napped in some unusual places. In a hayloft accidentally buried in straw. Behind the bread oven, warm and slightly singed. Once upright on a cart, your head tucked under your arm like a sleepy chicken. Midday was prime napping time, especially in summer when the heat made both plowing and politeness unbearable. Even in colder months, people grabbed sleep whenever they could between tasks under cloaks, leaning against walls or using a bundled tunic as the world's scratchiest pillow. And no one judged you, because sleep was a tool. It sharpened you, kept your temper in check, prevented you from yelling at turnips. Some households even scheduled it, the nooning period. You'd eat a bit gnawed off and wake refreshed, or at least moderately less grumpy. There's even a medieval poem that praises napping. The noon hour resteth man and mare with dreams so soft and burdens rare, which roughly translates to everybody calm down and go lie in a ditch for 20 minutes. Historians still argue whether midday sleep was universally practiced or more common among certain classes. You know one thing: when your Aunt Gerda starts snoring in the herb garden, no one interrupts her. Not even the bees. Some monasteries discouraged long naps. They feared it would breed sloth or dreams too wild to properly confess, but others encouraged it, especially if it helped maintain the rhythm of segmented sleep or kept elderly monks from turning into cranky cane-swinging philosophers. You once visited a friar who had a designated thinking bench under an apple tree. It was suspiciously reclined. He claimed to meditate. You caught him drooling once. Back in your own home, naps are versatile. If it's cold, you nap by the hearth. If it's hot, you stretch out under the eaves or curl up in the shade behind the barn. Your child naps on your chest like a sack of dreams. Even the dog has favorite nap zones, warm stones, soft ruts other dogs. And when you wake, you don't leap up. You don't apologize. You yawn. Stretch. Take in the way the sunlight has shifted while you dozed. The world moved, yes, but not too far. It waited for you just enough. Your brain feels rinsed, your body looser. You dust off your knees and return to the day. Because rest was never shameful here. It was part of the flow. And if someone teases you, you quote the classic line, "Only fools fear dreams, wise men nap." Then you go find another patch of grass and lie down again. Just to be sure, tonight your head lands on something firm. Not rock hard, but definitely in the family of supportive turnip. You squint in the dark and adjust the pillow, if you can call it that. Welcome to medieval pillow culture. Gaian era where softness was suspect peas, sometimes made appearances, and having a proper pillow meant you were either rich or incredibly resourceful. You give the pillow a cautious pat. Its slightly lumpy smells faintly of herbs and dust, and is against all odds kind of comforting. Most people back then didn't have pillows, not the kind you're used to. Down-filled clouds reserved for the nobility. Foam memory slabs. Still centuries and several revolutions away. Your pillow is likely a sack. Maybe of straw. Maybe of rags. Maybe of dried peas or barley husks, because someone somewhere decided sleep needed texture. And yet it works. You've met folks who sleep on folded cloaks. Some use a bundle of kindling. One particularly proud cousin insists on a hollowed block of wood, good for the spine, he says, though. He now walks with a lean that suggests otherwise. A few lucky souls had bolster pillows, long tubes of cloth filled with feathers or wool. These weren't for the head. They were cuddled like plush companions used to prop up knees or insulate against cold walls. In inns, you sometimes find communal pillows, shared lumps of cloth that have seen more faces than the town bishop. You once stayed in a tavern where the pillow clearly remembered previous occupants. You slept on your arm instead. Pillows were sometimes herbal, stuffed with lavender hops or chamomile, part support, part remedy. People believed these sleep-scented cushions could ease headaches, quiet nerves, or chase off nightmares. You tried a lavender one once. Dreamt of sheep. Singing sheep with opinions. Historians still argue whether pillows were a mark of wealth or just a regional habit. What's clear is they weren't universal. Many slept with nothing under their heads. Just the earth, or wood, or each other's shoulders, which honestly sounds kind of nice. You think of your child curled beside you, head resting on your arm? They stir, adjust, mumble something about onions. You smile and nudge their pillow back under their head. It's a flour sack emptied, cleaned, stuffed with feathers begged from the goose shed. It does the trick. For the nobility, pillows were embroidered, scented, decorative. You once saw one covered in silk and stitched with the scene from a saint's life. It looked far too precious to drool on. You drooled on it anyway. Monasteries had plain pillows, if any. Hard rolls stuffed with wool. Encouraged discipline and repose, which is just another way of saying thou shalt not get too comfy. Your own pillow carries your dreams now. Its shape molded by nights of tossing, burrowing, pressing your cheek into its warm, worn surface. You've cried into it, laughed into it, hidden under it when the goat wandered in and refused to leave. It's not beautiful, but it knows you. You pull it a little closer, fitting your head into the sweet spot, the one that cradles you just right where the herbs still whisper, and the straw remembers how you like to lie. Because the truth is, sleep doesn't demand perfection. It asks only for presence, for a place to rest your head, however humble. And tonight your pillow, lumpy, loyal, just a little squeaky, does its job. You exhale and let it carry you down. You stretch, blink, and try not to knock over the soup pot. Again, because tonight, guy, you're not in a bedroom. You're in the bedroom slash kitchen slash everything room otherwise known as the average medieval living space. There is no sleeping chamber. There is just the chamber. And you lucky soul have found the corner with the least amount of turnips. You sit up slowly. The fire has burned down to red coals and the room smells like cabbage old bread and socks that gave up last week. A small chicken eyes you from atop the bench. You stare back. The chicken wins. This is what most people slept in a one-room home, occasionally divided by a curtain if you were fancy or passive-aggressive about snoring. The idea of privacy not yet invented. Everyone is here. Your spouse, your child, your neighbor's cousin who's staying for just a night, possibly the midwife, definitely the dog. And for reasons no one fully understands, a goat tethered in the far corner, chewing on a boot. The same room that saw dinner cooked now hosts a symphony of soft snores, creaking rope beds, and the occasional whispered prayer. Because in this space, everything happened. People cooked, cleaned, laughed, mended shoes, gave birth, healed fevers, and yes, died. All in the same place. And then someone else would come in, move the stool, and nap right there anyway. Your bed might be near the hearth for warmth, or by the door if you're the kind of person who likes adventure and sudden chicken-related wake-ups. There's no designated nursery. Your baby sleeps wherever you sleep, sometimes tucked in a wooden cradle if you're lucky, sometimes wrapped in blankets and wedged between you and a wall with a firm don't roll. Furniture is minimal. A bench, a table, a storage chest that doubles as a pillow for the cousin who talks in his sleep. Your cloak hangs on a nail beside your boots. You pray a rat hasn't taken up residence inside either. And yet somehow this room works. It breathes. By day it bustles. By night it hushes. There's a rhythm to the shared space. Unspoken agreements. The fire must be banked before bed. The bread must be covered. The chamber pot must be placed strategically to avoid midnight disasters. Historians still argue whether these spaces allowed for real rest. But you've seen how people here adapt. They sleep through crying babies, squeaky mice, and the neighbor's sudden desire to discuss roof repairs at midnight. They learn to rest in the noise, to trust it, to be comforted by it. You remember one winter night deep in the coldest stretch of February when your entire family huddled in a heap by the fire. No one said much. No one moved. But the crackle of logs, the soft breathing, the chicken's occasional muttering, it was enough. You felt safe. The goat ate your boot that night, but you slept like a saint. Tonight the fire cracks again. Your child rolls over and tucks their hand into yours. Someone in the corner coughs, then sighs back into slumber, and you, surrounded by stew pots, mismatched boots, and the gentle clutter of daily life, feel the quiet weight of a world at rest. No door to close, no silence to curate, just life sleeping beside you. You lie back, pull the blanket to your chin, and drift off, dreaming not of solitude but of the soft chorus of people being people, snoring, shifting, living together. You're staring at the ceiling. Again, counting the same 3 cobwebs in the same 3 corners, well, 2 corners now. The spider from corner 3 has moved on. Probably found a quieter place to nap. Because tonight, guy, you can't sleep. You shift. You sigh. You adjust your lumpy pillow. You tuck the blanket just so. Still nothing. Your brain has decided to throw a party and did not invite your eyelids. Welcome to medieval insomnia. Yes, it existed. No, they didn't call it that. But people in the Middle Ages absolutely had nights like this, tossing, turning, battling the restless body and the overthinking mind. So, what did they do? First, they accepted it. Insomnia wasn't a personal failing. It was part of the rhythm. Especially for those who followed the 2-sleep pattern, first slumber, midnight wakefulness, second sleep. That in-between time often stretched longer than you'd like. You sit up, grab the candle stub and light it. The fire has dimmed, so you place a pot of embers near your feet just for warmth. The glow softens the room, turns the familiar clutter into shadow puppets. The goat snores. You envy it. You reach for your herbal pouch tonight, stuffed with hops and dried apple peel. Not your best combo, but comforting. One remedy, candle gazing. You stare at the flame. Let your thoughts flicker with it. Breathe in, out. Pretend the candle's the only thing that matters. It doesn't always work, but it slows things down. There's a prayer too murmured under breath. Peace to my limbs, stillness to my heart. Let dreams not gallop, let sleep now start. You whisper it. Twice. Still awake. Next trick, hot drink. You warm a bit of milk over the coals, stir in a pinch of crushed fennel seed, and a single dried plum. Don't ask why. Someone's grandmother swore by it, and you're too tired to argue. You sip. The warmth spreads slowly like a blanket from the inside out. Then there's the counting. Not sheep. Those aren't reliable. You tried once and ended up building a mental barn. Instead, you count things you've seen today. 5 chickens, 2 spilled buckets, 1 man yelling at a cloud, 3 cabbages shaped suspiciously like the bishop. Sometimes it helps. Other times you lean into it. Insomnia wasn't always battled, it was used. People got up, wrote letters, whittled spoons, prayed. You think of Brother Said scratching notes by candlelight, convinced the best Latin came between midnight and dawn. Or your neighbor who swears her best ideas arrive precisely when she should be asleep. Last week she invented a scarf that's also a bag. She's calling it a skag. Historians still argue whether insomnia was more common in candlelit centuries, or if we simply notice it more now. But the records are there, people pacing, praying, or softly singing their worries into the darkness. And sometimes when nothing else worked, they just waited. Let sleep come on its own terms. You lie back again. The milk is gone. The candle flickers lower. Your body feels heavy finally. The tension is still there but softened. The goat mutters in its sleep, possibly dreaming of turnips. You smile, because even in this restless moment, you're not really alone. Not across time, not across stories. Others have stared at ceilings, heard owls cry, counted anything to keep from thinking about everything. And eventually, now they've felt that shift, that slow descent, that breath that finally lands like a feather, and you follow it down. Eyes closed, body slack, insomnia retreating like a wave after a long tide. Sleep returns not with a bang but with a whisper, and you let it carry you. You rise with the moon tonight not because you want to, but because the rooster apparently forgot its cue, and the light through the shutters is silver instead of gold. Outside the village slumbers. But the sky, it's busy. Because Guy, tonight we explore how almanacs moonlight and strange little sky rules shaped when and how medieval folks tuck themselves in. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and step into the cool air, careful not to wake the toddler curled like a loaf beside the hearth. The stars are out in full gossip mode. The moon is fat and smug. You nod to it. It doesn't nod back. People back then lived by the heavens not in a whimsical follow your star sign way, but in a deeply practical, occasionally superstitious sense. Sleep, like everything else, followed the calendar of saints and seasons, and the sky. First off, almanacs. These were the medieval version of lifestyle guides, part weather forecast, part moral advice, part weirdly poetic instruction manual. They told you when to plant, when to harvest, when to bleed a chicken, and yes, when to sleep deeply or lightly. Some even claimed certain nights were cursed for sleep due to planetary alignments or questionable saints having bad days. You flip open a tattered parchment by the firelight. Today's entry: do not dream near the full moon lest you stir the spirits of yesterday. Cheery. And yet people swore by this stuff. Moon phases mattered. New moon. Quiet, restful sleep. Waxing crescent, vivid dreams, possibly prophetic or indigestion related. Full moon. Dangerous time. Some swore it made sleep harder or dreams stranger. You once dreamt you were being chased by a wheel of cheese during a full moon. It was honestly majestic. Waning moon. Good time for letting go both of stress and of that annoying toenail you keep catching on the blanket. Even the zodiac signs had their say. Do not sleep with your head pointing north when Aries rules one almanac warns, lest your dreams grow bold and your pillow grow stiff. You tried it once. Dreamt of angry sheep. The church calendar also shaped sleep. On feast days you might stay up later, pray longer, or collapse in a warm daze after too much honeyed ale. On fast days, sleep came light, interrupted by hunger and whispered guilt. There were eves when spirits were believed to walk All Hallows Eve, midsummer night. On these nights, people watched the sky, left herbs at the doorstep, and slept with one eye open, just in case. And of course, the seasons changed everything. Summer meant late sleep and early rise of the air, buzzing with activity and insects with no sense of bedtime etiquette. Winter was the true sleep season. Darkness fell early and stayed long. Fires burned low. Beds were piled high. You might sleep 12 hours or more if you could get comfortable between the snores and the goose who'd decided your ankles were the best place to hide. Historians still argue whether this seasonal shift in sleep was universal or regional. You'd argue it with anyone. You've felt it. The difference between a spring nap in a sunny field and a winter nap in the folds of 4 blankets and one particularly fluffy cousin night and day. Tonight you return inside. The moon has done its work. You're tired again. You tuck the almanac back under the bread shelf, kiss the top of your child's head, and crawl under your own cover's pillow. Lumpy blanket, heavy heart full. Because medieval sleep wasn't just biological. It was celestial. Ritual. A quiet negotiation between stars and straw. And as you drift off again, you hear the wind in the chimney, the slow tick of your own breath, and the whisper of the moon reminding you, this night, like every other, was written long ago. And your dreams, they're right on schedule. You blink awake and immediately notice 2 things. Your face is warm, and there's a sheep gently sneezing on the other side of the wall. Yes, you're sleeping near livestock again. Which means, Guy, tonight we're cozying up with one of the medieval sleeper's most faithful companions, soundproofing with sheep. Or more accurately, how medieval people tried with mixed success to make their nights quietish, because silence wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't even expected. Your bed is positioned in the corner of a modest house, timber-framed drafty, and currently hosting a soundtrack of snoring, creaking distant owl calls, and the occasional ominous bucket drop. Sleep in the Middle Ages was not silent. It was layered. You roll over, pulling the blanket up to your chin, and listen. The sheep outside rustles in the hay. The fire in the hearth crackles softly. And above you, the thatch roof occasionally sighs under the weight of wind, or whatever brave rodent is patrolling tonight. So how did people deal with this? Enter soft architecture? Curtains, tapestries, woolen hangings? These weren't just decorative, they were the medieval equivalent of acoustic panels. Hung across walls around beds, even over rafters, they softened the echo of stone and timber. Some were embroidered with saints. Others just looked vaguely like vegetables. You once slept under one that might have been a goose or an extremely stern cabbage. These hangings didn't block all noise, but they dulled it. Especially the snoring of Cousin Wilfred, who has a gift for nasal percussion. And then there were canopies. A good bed canopy didn't just look fancy, it trapped warmth and muffled ambient sounds. Some were linen, some wool, some were so patched they looked like sleepy quilts in midair. You remember one embroidered with tiny suns. You counted them until you fell asleep. There were 23. Probably. Animals, strangely enough, also helped. Yes, they made noise, but also warmth and rhythm. The low breathing of cows. The rustle of feathers as chickens settled in. Even the occasional donkey bray became part of the nighttime chorus background hums of a world still turning. You'd sleep above the animals if your house had a loft, or beside them if you needed the warmth. Some even believed certain beasts guarded against bad dreams. You still keep a chicken feather under your pillow. Superstition. Maybe. But you haven't had that dream about the dancing bishop since. Doors and shutters played their part too. The average door wasn't thick. It creaked like a philosophy student with joint pain. But a well-fitted door kept out drafts and muffled arguments from next door. You stuffed the gaps with wool scraps. The shutters closed against the wind, latched with care. Once you caught the cat sleeping on top of the shutter. She looked smug. She was. Even floor coverings helped. A good rush mat softened the footstep echo. Some folks layered them with herbs like lavender or mint, not just for scent, but to discourage bugs and create a gentle noise buffer. It worked. Unless you stepped on them barefoot at 3 a.m. in the dark, then they were just crunchy. And then there were people, the quiet ones, the restless ones, the sleep talkers. You learn to tune out their murmurs, to find peace in the rhythm of the room, like waves, like breathing. Historians still debate whether medieval folks craved silence the way we do now. After all, they lived in noise. Bells, hooves, barking, prayers. There was no quiet hour, but perhaps that's what made sleep so precious. Not the absence of sound, but the balance of it. The muffled fire, the heartbeat next to yours, the sheep sneeze behind the wall. You smile, because this strange as it seems is quiet, not perfect silence, but a kind of peace, a room holding you gently in its familiar creaks and soft animal sighs. You roll onto your side, tuck the blanket tight, and close your eyes again. The world hums around you, and you rest not in silence, but in sound, softened by care. You're dreaming, you think. It's hard to tell because in this dream, you're simply walking down the village path wearing a crown of thistles and accompanied by a goose who speaks in riddles. You ask it for directions and it responds, "Left is right when the moon is wrong." Yes, definitely a dream. Because tonight, Guy, we're floating into the peculiar poetic and occasionally prophetic world of medieval dream meanings and the magical creatures who kept showing up uninvited. In the Middle Ages, dreams weren't just brain static. They were messages, portals, warnings, and sometimes just oddly creative replays of your daily life with extra ducks. You wake slowly, the goose's last riddle fading, and find yourself in the gentle dark. The fire glows faintly. The pillow smells of lavender and something sweet. You blink, trying to keep the dream from slipping away. Back then, people believed dreams came from three main sources: the divine, the demonic, and dinner. Yes, what you ate before bed mattered. Beans. Prepare for chaotic dreams. Spicy stew. You might wake in Latin, bread and honey. Dreams of gardens and safe things. You try to remember what you had. Was there garlic that would explain the bishop with wolf ears? Dreams were serious business. Kings had dream interpreters. Monks wrote entire books on dream classification. One particularly enthusiastic abbot insisted that dreaming of climbing a ladder meant you were due for either spiritual promotion or a sudden trip to the roof. Possibly both. You once dreamt of bees making a nest in your ear. A village wise woman interpreted it as a sign of wisdom. Your cousin said it meant you needed to clean your ears. You chose wisdom. Bees are noble. Animals appeared often in dreams. Foxes signaled betrayal. Dogs loyalty or guilt. Pigs practicality or gluttony or both if the pig was wearing shoes. And then there were geese. Mysterious, symbolic, usually hilarious. Some said they brought messages from the dead. Others claimed they were simply the only animal willing to wake you with a honk and no explanation. Water meant emotion or secrets. Flying meant freedom or a leaky roof. Teeth falling out was then as now universally unsettling. The local blacksmith swore it meant someone was talking about you. The tanner said it meant someone wanted your sheep. Your sheep just stared? Historians still argue whether medieval dream analysis leaned more on superstition or psychology. But let's be honest, nobody dreams about turnips just because of superstition. There were practical uses for dreams too. People recorded them, shared them, asked for interpretation over breakfast like one might discuss the weather or that ominous creaking sound behind the barn. You remember a villager who claimed he saw the future in dreams. Mostly minor things: when the ale would sour, when the dog would give birth, when the mayor would lose another shoe. He was right often enough that people started calling him the seer. He preferred the sleepy prophet, had a nice ring to it. Some dreams were considered divine messages. others demonic traps. You once had a dream so lovely, so oddly serene, it left you walking softly all day. A field of blue flowers, a distant bell, a hand on your shoulder, warm and wordless. No one could explain it. You didn't ask. Some dreams aren't puzzles. They're gifts. And tonight, as you settle back under your blanket, you invite the dreams back. The good ones, the strange ones, the ones that speak in geese and whisper truths you'll almost understand by morning. You close your eyes, drift again. And somewhere just beyond the veil of sleep, a goose is waiting with another riddle. You're ready this time. You awaken with the distinct impression that something loud just happened. A pop. A thud. Maybe an overly confident rooster slamming into the shutter again. Whatever it was, your dreams have scattered like startled chickens. You sit up and remember you're under siege, which in medieval terms means it's a perfectly reasonable time to talk about how people manage to sleep through chaos arrows and the occasional flaming cow. Because, Guy, tonight we're tucking into the surprisingly adaptable world of castle slumber under siege. First, the basics. You're in a fortified town or keep. The gates are barred. Supplies have been stashed. And now, as the enemy settles in outside with tense ladders and questionable morale, the folks inside must do something harder than fighting, sleeping through it. You lie back on your makeshift mattress, two cloaks, some straw, and a flat wooden spoon you're pretending is a neck rest. The walls tremble faintly with distant hammering. Someone nearby is snoring defiantly. Someone else mutters a prayer in the corner. In peacetime, you might have a room, or at least a corner to yourself. In siege time, you're sleeping elbow to elbow with soldiers, servants, local dignitaries, and one elderly goat who refuses to evacuate. Everyone's tense. The walls are cold. The food is beige. And yet people sleep. They have to. Sometimes in shifts. Sometimes wherever they can find room, a stairwell, a storage nook under the trestle table with the emergency pickled cabbage. One chronicler described sleeping with armor for blankets and dread for dreams. Poetic. But people didn't sleep in full armor. That would be like sleeping in a wheelbarrow full of soup cans. Uncomfortable and unnecessarily loud. Instead, they kept armor nearby with weapons and boots close enough to grab if the walls were breached, or someone yelled, "They've got a goat-a-pult again." Some towns had rotating sleep schedules, half the guard rest while the others patrol. Bells marked the watch hours and torches glowed from ramparts like nervous fireflies. Inside, people found ways to create calm. Tapestries hung to dampen noise. Incense burned to soften the stench of too many people in too small a place. And if you were lucky, a bard might hum something gentle or a friar might recite psalms until even the goats looked holy. Historians still debate how restful siege sleep truly was. But the records show that people adapted. Bodies exhausted by stress and hunger found a way to shut down even if just for an hour or two at a time. You felt it. That moment when sleep insists. Even if the world is noisy, crowded, crumbling, you've dozed on a floor while arguments flared overhead. You've napped with a dagger under your pillow and your foot stuck in someone else's helmet. And still, dreams came. There's a kind of surrender in siege sleep. Not defeat, but acceptance. You rest because you must, because your body can't hold tension forever, because someone else is watching the gate. Tonight, as the fire gutters low and your neighbor rolls over onto a bag of onions with a groan, you close your eyes. You listen not for silence, but for steadiness. Boots pacing on stone. The wind slipping past the battlements. A lullaby someone's humming near the wall, off-key but heartfelt. You breathe. You let the world fall away. And in this moment inside the keep beneath the stars hidden by smoke, you find the small, stubborn peace of sleep. Even under siege it comes. Quietly, softly. With room for dreams, you wake to a sound so gentle it barely qualifies as sound at all. A hush, a hum, a soft voice somewhere nearby weaving a tune older than the bricks in your wall. You don't open your eyes just yet, because tonight, Guy, we're letting ourselves drift into the warm, rocking world of medieval lullabies. Those quiet spells that sang people to sleep long before bedtime playlists were a thing. The voice is familiar. A mother, a sister, a nurse with a rhythm only tired arms can teach. You've heard it 100 times and still it catches you the rise and fall, the cadence that says, "You are safe now. Close your eyes." Back then, lullabies weren't just sweet, they were tools. Practical, rhythmic, sometimes surprisingly blunt. One of the most popular in England was a tune sung over and over like a prayer turned poem. Lulle, lulle, little child, why do you weep so sore? The King of Heaven your father is, and you shall weep no more. Sweet, right? Until you remember that some versions included warnings about wolves, witches, or that if you didn't sleep, the sheep would report you to St. Cuthbert. Lullabies were layered, part comfort, part bribe, part soft threat, because medieval parents were tired too. And without pacifiers, nightlights, or caffeinated patience, they did what they could, sang gently into the dark, and hoped the baby bought the story. Even adults weren't immune. After a long day's labor, people hummed to themselves as they wound down. You've caught yourself doing it, repeating the same old tune about a knight who lost his boots and found wisdom in a muddy puddle. There's power in these songs. They carry memory. The same melody passed from grandmother to granddaughter, with only the name swapped, the verses added or dropped like stones in a stream. Some lullabies were in Latin, some in the local tongue. Some were nonsense rhymes, just syllables strung like beads to distract the mind and anchor the breath. Buy low, baby trundle and tune. Stars be rising, sleep comes soon. One shepherd you knew sang to his sheep. He swore it kept them calm. You weren't sure until you tried it. That you looked positively serene. Lullabies also doubled as charms. Whispers to ward off bad dreams. Repetitions to settle the spirit. The refrain itself, soft, low, slow, created a trance that eased the body into sleep. You've watched children relax mid-wail, their fists uncurling like ferns just from a well-timed hum. Historians still argue how widespread these traditions were. But you know this, in every village, every hall, someone knew a tune, knew when to sing it, knew when to stop and just sway. Because lullabies weren't about performance. They were presence. A voice saying, "I'm here. I see you. Sleep now." Tonight, your neighbor hums one of her own invention. You don't recognize the words, but the melody loops like a rocking cradle, like a wind-blown reed. You let yourself float on it. Not thinking, just breathing. The room grows softer around the sound. The bed feels warmer. The pillow fits your cheek again. You hum a little too, just under your breath. Just enough to remember. Because even grown-ups need lullabies, especially grown-ups. And tonight yours is waiting, right here, soft as breath, old as dreams, ready to carry you down. You wake with one foot too warm, the other far too cold, and a feeling that somehow summer has turned into spring again, backward. You shuffle, adjust, try flipping the blanket like a pancake. Nothing helps. Because, Guy, we've reached that restless final frontier, sleeping through the changing seasons, and how medieval folks turned environmental chaos into bedtime comfort. You sit up squinting into the half-dark of early morning and feel the air bite your skin like a disapproving aunt. It's damp. Not cold exactly, but clammy. And you know the signs. The seasons are shifting, and so must you. Back in winter, your bed was an act of architecture. Layers upon layers, straw mattress, wool, under blanket, heavy linen sheets, 2 cloaks of fur, and if you were lucky, a sleeping partner who radiated heat like a friendly oven. Sometimes you even heated a stone by the fire and wrapped it in cloth. A crude hot water bottle. You called it Saint Toast. You slept tight, curled like a question mark, breathing in the thick scent of sheep grease and fennel. You dreamt of warm things, mostly stew. But now as the air thins and the earth stretches itself awake, your bed begins to rebel. Wool feels itchy. Cloaks slide off in the night. The pillow smells faintly alive. So what did medieval folks do? They adapted. First, ventilation. Shutters opened wider. Cross breezes were invited in. You hung damp cloths in the window to cool the room as the breeze passed through. The dog refused to move from the draftiest spot. You let it win. Second textiles changed. Wool gave way to linen. Heavy blankets were folded and stored in chests with dried herbs, lavender, rosemary, even dried lemon peel if you were fancy, or had a cousin who traded with the Normans. You once tried sleeping with just a sheet in mid-June. The goat stole it. You woke sunburned and emotionally betrayed. Sleeping positions changed too. People sprawled more, turned onto their backs, slept with limbs like startled stars across straw mats that barely kept the dust out. Windows stayed open unless it was midsummer and the bugs declared war. Then you hung bundles of mint to discourage the biting. The bugs laughed. In autumn, sleep got heavier. You brought the blankets back, threw straw over the mattress to fill it again, fatter, warmer, more honest. The hearth fire was banked before bed, glowing gently like a secret. Apples dried on the rafters. You dreamt of walking through leaf piles and arguing with saints about when it was appropriate to eat chestnuts. And then came spring, wet, soft, unpredictable. One day warm, the next laced with frost. You kept 2 bed setups ready, light and heavy, and changed them daily. Some people slept in layers they could remove like nesting dolls. You once slept in 3 tunics and still woke up shivering. The bed became a battleground between comfort and climate. And yet sleep still came, because people respected it, no matter the season. Even when the wind howled through the shutters or the summer heat turned straw into a sauna, you slept. Maybe less, maybe strange. But sleep came folded into the fabric of days too long or nights too short. Historians still debate how much the seasons impacted health and mood. You could answer that with a single memory: the spring you didn't change your bedding in time and spent 3 nights dreaming of icy toes and judgmental saints. Never again. Tonight you adjust the blanket one last time. You're halfway between warm and chilled, but just close enough to comfort. The dog sighs. The wind shifts, and the season, like your breath, settles into something sleep-shaped. You close your eyes and let it carry you. You stretch in the dark. The room is quiet, truly quiet. No clattering pans, no whispering neighbors, no owl demanding payment for unsolicited wisdom. Just you, your breath, and the soft weight of the night pressing gently on your blanket. Tonight, Guy, we draw the final curtain on our journey and ask the question that's been napping in the corner this whole time. Did medieval people actually sleep better than we do? And oddly enough, they might have. You lie back, arms folded gently across your middle, and consider the evidence not in charts or stats, but in rhythm and ritual, in scent and stillness, in the 1,000 small details that shaped each medieval night. They didn't sleep more than us necessarily, but they slept differently, and in some ways better. They followed the sun, not the screen. When the light faded, so did the noise. The body aligned itself with dusk, and sleep crept in naturally like mist over a field. They understood rest not as weakness, but wisdom. Hard work earned soft hours. A nap was not laziness, it was medicine. They didn't apologize for it. They leaned into it. Their sleep was social even when space was tight. Sharing warmth, sharing dreams, feeling the presence of others in the dark, and letting that comfort lull them deeper. Their world moved more slowly. It took time to sleep, just as it took time to rise. Morning came with songs and soup, not a snoozed alarm, and 5 missed messages. They had rituals, herbs tucked into pillows, stories before bed. Prayers whispered not from obligation, but because they helped shape the breath and still the mind. And maybe most importantly, they expected sleep to return. They didn't panic when it didn't come all at once. They didn't shame themselves for midnight wakefulness. They walked with it, lit a candle, listened to the wind, drank warm milk and waited. Historians still argue whether the medieval sleep cycle is worth resurrecting. But tonight, lying in your straw-stuffed bed with your nightcap slightly askew your knees, touching the edge of someone else's dreams, and the fire humming its low lullaby, you feel the difference. Sleep here is not a task. It's a place, a moment, a rhythm, and you've joined it, one breath at a time. Your pillow's still a bit lumpy, fits just right. Your blanket smells like herbs and old stories. The goat for once is not chewing anything. And you're floating, softly, contentedly, wrapped not just in cloth and warmth but in history. Because medieval people didn't have perfect lives, but they did know how to rest. And tonight you do too. Let the hush settle now. Let the sounds grow softer, the breath stretch longer, the edges blur. You've wandered a long, gentle road tonight through hay-filled mattresses and herb-scented pillows, through lullabies whispered against wooden walls and dreams riddled with riddle-telling geese. You've stepped into shared beds and narrow nooks, listened to monks chant at midnight, and mothers soothe children with sleepy rhymes. You've drifted under tapestries beside goats and castles, and under skies marked by stars and saints. You've tasted barley stew, wrapped yourself in wool, blinked at candles, and sighed under a roof that creaks with the weight of centuries. And now it's time to let it all fall away. Let the straw shift beneath you. Let the blanket cocoon your limbs. Let the breath come slower, and slower still. Whatever the world asks tomorrow, it can wait. Tonight you rest, not because you've earned it, not because you've finished anything, but because you are here. And that is enough. So let sleep return not in a rush but in ripples. Let it rise from the earth, from the embers, from the memory of lullabies and softly snoring dogs. Let it find you, hold you, rock you like a cradle made of time. And know when you wake, the rhythm will still be there. Waiting. I'll be here with another story for you tomorrow night.